MZTV.
Today, ladies and gentlemen, you are going to get the most precise and concise definition of free will you have ever gotten, and all this from a guy wearing horizontal stripes. This is Martin Zender. You are at MZTV. I'm recording from my cottage here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I've been doing a study on Romans chapter 9, 10, and 11. Paul's 3-chapter departure, although he didn't know it was 3 chapters. He just started ranting about Israel. This is a 3-chapter departure, speaking on the fortunes of his favorite little pet nation, namely Israel, from which he came. So I finished chapter 9 on Friday, and today we're starting chapter 10, and this is one of my, I keep saying, everything I get into this, I say, this is my favorite chapter, this is my favorite passage, this is my favorite chapter. Well, this is one of my favorites because it is such a beautiful definition coming out the bat of human free will. And Paul, of course, doesn't mean to be talking about human free will. I'm not even sure, this is the weird thing, is I am not even sure that free will was an issue back in that day. Not free will per se. I don't think anyone thought they were independent of God, but wait a minute. No, that's wrong. That's wrong. See, I keep trying to give people the benefit of the doubt on this free will thing. I try it once in a while, okay? Usually I have to have a stiff drink. And I said, okay, I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt on free will. Well, they probably believe God is controlling everything. No, they don't. Not even in the first century. All right, throw that out. I try to be nice. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Romans chapter 10, verse 1. Indeed, brethren, the delight of my heart and my petition to God for their sake is for salvation. Stop right there. That was verse 1 of Romans chapter 10. Paul wants his people to be saved. Now, you may ask this question, to be saved into what? Well, broadly, to be saved into eonian life, but specifically into their calling. That is the gospel of the circumcision. Now, it is my conviction that when Paul spoke to people individually, say his brethren according to the flesh, I think he proposed his gospel to them, his evangel. If you are unfamiliar with this show or what I teach here, Paul, the Apostle Paul, had a different gospel than Peter had. Peter had a gospel for Israel concerning the earth. Paul had a gospel for the nations concerning heaven. A definitive verse for you there is Galatians 2:7. Paul says, I'm a minister of the uncircumcision according as Peter is a minister of the gospel of the circumcision. 2 different operations. For a thorough explanation, go to my website, martinzender.com. Go to books, order my book, The First Idiot in Heaven. That is the best book you'll ever read on this topic. Or it may be the best book you'll ever read, period. It's all there. It's all there. I couldn't find a book with every piece in one place, so I had to write it. So I did. It was hard, but I'm glad it's out there now. So Paul is addressing his brethren and the delight of his heart. He's praying to God for their salvation. Thus, at the time he's writing this, they're not saved. If they're saved, why would he be praying for their salvation? See, I make sense for a living. That's why you're here. For I am testifying to them. See, he actually says this to them because Paul didn't worry about being nice. He was pretty forward about things. That's what got him in trouble. But he's relaying it to the Romans. I'm testifying to them that now what's going to follow here is why they're not saved. And this not only applies to the Jews, but Paul doesn't set out to be teaching on free will, but he does. This not only applies to the Jews, but this is a universal truth. And here it goes. It applies to anyone who, well, you're going to see. For I am testifying to them that they have a zeal of God, but not in accord with recognition. Okay, that's step one. They have a zeal. They're all excited about God. They want to do things for God, but not in accord with recognition. In other words, they don't know what they're talking about. a Zender paraphrase would be, they have all the excitement in the world, but they don't know what they're talking about. They're excited as hell, but they're ignorant. So their excitement means nothing to them. In Timothy, we have a similar passage where Paul's writing to the nations via Timothy. It says 2 Timothy chapter 3, it has to do with a form of devoutness, but denying the power. My Bible's ripped up. I can't even read it here. Yeah. Fond of their own gratification rather than fond of God. Ooh, that's a good one. 2 Timothy 3, it's the same thing. We're going to find out this is related to Romans 10. I can't see what verse I'm at because my Bible's torn out. It's right towards the beginning. It's probably around verse 4 or 5. 2 Timothy 3. Talking about in the last days, perilous periods will be present in all their alliterating glory. We are in these perilous periods right now. Men will be uncontrollable, fierce, averse to the good. Some women, too, I hear. It's just a rumor. I don't know. Fond of their own gratification rather than fond of God. Having a form of devoutness but denying the power. Wow, there is a convicting statement right there. Fond of their own gratification. The human is gratified to establish his or her own righteousness. Fond of their own gratification rather than fond of God. In other words, human gratification comes first. And this is certainly the way with human free will, where humans compete with one another to try to produce faith so that they can save themselves from eternal torment, which is a lie. And if you don't realize that eternal torment is a lie, get my book, Martin Zender Goes to Hell. Very short book, 45-minute read. It'll explain the whole thing to you. And then once you get it explained to you, you'll get it. And then you'll be delivered from the fear and condemnation and horror of that teaching. Back to Paul, Romans 10. I am testifying to them, they have a zeal of God, but not in accord with recognition. They're all excited, but they don't know what they're talking about. For they, being ignorant of the righteousness of God and seeking to establish their own righteousness, were not subject to the righteousness of God. For Christ is the consummation of law for righteousness to everyone who is believing. This phrase is loaded. This is so beautiful. It says it all. The Jews are not saved. This is why the Jews Paul's speaking of are not saved. Remember, the delight of my heart, my petition to God for their sake is for salvation. Now he's telling why they're not saved. Well, number one, they have a zeal of God, but they don't know what they're talking about. That defines almost every Christian on the planet. They have zeal, but they don't know what they're doing. They're trying to produce miracles on their own. They're getting false miracles in many cases. In all cases. They're teaching doctrines of humans rather than the teachings of God. Eternal torment, human free will, that the human being can be independent of God, and the Trinity, that Jesus Christ didn't really die because he's God. All false teachings. So they don't recognize anything. But they're all excited. They're trying to get people into their camps, into their churches, into their Bible camps, but they don't have any recognition. They don't know God. They don't know Christ. I say that with boldness. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, I believe it is, they are worshiping another Jesus, a different Jesus that Paul did not herald. There are many people who at the end of this eon will say, Lord, Lord, didn't we do mighty works in your name? Didn't we do this in your name? Do that in your name? Who else can say this except Christians? They're the only people I know of that do shit in his name. And he will say to them, depart from me, workers of lawlessness, I never knew you. How can that be? Because of this. They have a form of devoutness, as Paul wrote to 2 Timothy. They have a form of devoutness, but deny the power. It's empty. There's no oomph behind it. It's void. But it looks good. A form. They have ornate buildings. But it's useless because they deny the power. And they're ignorant of God. That goes along with denying the power. They're ignorant of the righteousness of God. Back now to Romans chapter 10. Being ignorant of the righteousness of God. And here's the damning phrase. And seeking to establish their own righteousness. There it is. That is the pat definition of human free will that I promised you when this show started. Free will is seeking to establish your own righteousness. How do you establish your own righteousness unless you do it independently of God? Because if God assists you, then you're not really doing it on your own. You're not establishing your own righteousness. Well, we know that God not only assists you, he breaks down your little world. He crashes your little self-walled system. And he gives you faith, invades your world. They don't believe this. The Jews didn't believe it in Romans 10. Christians don't believe it today. They seek to establish their own righteousness. Everybody wants to have their place. Some people want to be leaders in the Christian church. They want to have a place, and they want to establish the fact that they are righteous and other people aren't. This needs to be established. And the Jews seeking to establish their own righteousness. Watch any Bible movie you can find. You got the weirdos like Abraham, Moses, the apostles, Jesus, Paul, and then you got the whole religious establishment, and all they do all day long is seek to establish their own righteousness. And Christians are the same way. They have to think all the time, am I saved? Am I saved? Am I saved? In other words, have I done enough? Have I done enough? Have I done enough? Is there a secret sin in my life? They're constantly analyzing themselves. Why? Because they are seeking to establish their own righteousness. What the hell is trying not to sin except seeking to establish your own righteousness? I've taught you here over the years from Romans chapter 6 that sin is no longer bringing us into condemnation. Well, Romans chapter 8, there's no more condemnation, and Romans 5, where sin increases, grace superabounds. 2 Corinthians 5, God is no longer recognizing anyone according to flesh. And Romans 6, we were crucified with Christ. The old humanity was put to death with its practices. So we're good. How did all that happen? By the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Was that our righteousness in any sense, in any way, shape, or form? How could it be? We weren't even born yet. How can it be our righteousness? This was established for us by another, capital A there, another, that is Jesus Christ. The Jews didn't believe that. Well, of course, they weren't privy to Jesus Christ through their history, but it's this habit that religious people have that's built into people to want to establish, to fix their own position. Like, I did this. This is why I'm blessed, because I am righteous. I have my own righteousness. And no matter how much Christians try to whitewash this, oh, it's not my righteousness. The hell it isn't. Because you believe that your decision saved you from an eternity of torment and got you to heaven. Your decision, your own, I'm sorry, but that's your own righteousness. Because deciding to believe in Jesus is one of the most righteous things a person could do, is it not? Is believing in Jesus a righteous act? Ask somebody that. If they say no, they're a liar. Because their own belief system says that it is, because that's the coin of the realm. That's the penny into the gum machine. It's not a penny anymore. What is it? A quarter? Okay. That's the quarter into the gum machine that brings out the gum, that spits out the gumball of salvation. And if you're this way, you're ignorant of the righteousness of God. Everything I just said concerning the cross, what Jesus Christ did from 2 Corinthians 5, Romans 6, Romans 8, all those passages I just gave you, they don't know any of these things. The Jews couldn't learn any lessons from the past of the heroes of faith. No lessons. They didn't learn anything. They're too proud. They're proud people. Arrogant, stiff-necked. And Christians are their spiritual progeny. Spiritual meaning anti-spiritual. They seek to establish their own righteousness. And by doing that, they're so involved with themselves, they can't see over here. Something happened. Ooh, something happened for sin over here. Oh, Jesus Christ was crucified for the sins of the world and he took them away. Ooh, but they can't see that because they are consumed with the need to establish their own righteousness. I saw a house one time. It had this concrete deer out in front. People decorate their houses with concrete animals, concrete squirrels, concrete deer. I don't know why. And there was a real deer behind the tree. But, you know, the way it was set up, as I looked at the house and looked at the real deer, looked at the frickin' concrete monstrosity, they couldn't see the real deer because they got this Walt Disney deer built in their yard, made out of cement. So you construct, in the religious world, they construct this entire kingdom revolved around establishing your own righteousness, and they're so busy and occupied, they forgot to see that Jesus Christ died for the sins of the world. Ooh, that was a hell of a memo to miss. Yeah. Jesus Christ established righteousness. And by faith, we understand that we have been made righteous by God. Faith brings us into knowledge of a fact that Christ, God via Christ, established righteousness for the human race, killed the old humanity, brought in a new humanity. Hardly anybody knows about it. I'm teaching you about it now, and I will continue to teach about it. When? Namely, tomorrow.